Good morning. This is Jerry Gulke with the pre-open reports on the USDA mega crop report. And as usual, we can expect this one to be a barn burner along with the January 12th, and it turned out to be just that. Corn acres were at 88.798, which is very close to their outlook in February. It didn't change much. I guess they pegged it pretty good. It was about 1 million acres less than what our survey showed, but still more than what a lot of people thought as well. What this said was, if you consider where we've been since January, and if we're making our decisions in December, January, and February about what we're going to plant, and we tell them in March, even with the downdraft of 75 or 80 cents in corn, we still suggested we're going to plant more corn, and which is kind of troublesome to me, I guess, but we like to plant corn, so here it is. And now if you're the market, you look at it and say, gosh, if you're going to do that, Jerry, how much more are you going to plant in some of this marginal ground if it is wet and now turns dry like it is 70 degrees in North Dakota and the wind blowing? So likely these numbers will change eventually, but not that far off in the acres, really. 1 million acres is 150 million bushels, not a big deal. Except in the corn stocks that they reported, they did exactly what we felt that they were going to do, and that's find more corn, contrary to what a lot of farmers, just a lot of people out there said. Eventually the USDA is going to wake up and realize that the crop isn't there, and for a long time we tried convincing other people that when they measure these bushels, they divide weight by 56. They don't care if it's 40-pound test weight or 60-pound test weight, you divide by 56. And that's what they found, and they also found we didn't lose as much going into North Dakota, harvesting last year's grain that was still in the fields up there. There's still some in the fields, of course, hasn't been harvested. So, not good news for beans or for corn, because you found another 200 million bushels, which is another 1.5 million acres of corn, basically, 1 million plus of average corn, and so that's really like saying. You lost it in the field, if you want to believe that, but we gained it back somewhere else. So not good news for corn. Corn should be 5 to 10 lower. I suspect it'll get hit harder, perhaps, because beans should really get a hit. Soybean acres at 78 million acres, about close to where we were at, and about 1 million more than what they thought in February, USDA, and right in line with other people's guesses. I suspect that number will rise. Take a look at November beans. We're still over $9. I suspect beans could drop 50 cents. Maybe they go limit. I don't know. They're calling them 10 to 20 lower. If you can get beans sold and you haven't sold much for fall or for 2011, call your elevator and give them 20 cents and then kiss them on the way out, because I think you got to do something. If you're we're 100% hedged in everything, over 100% hedged for 2009 and 2010, and 25% for 2011, based on what we see coming out of South America and the huge carryover we're going to have. And this soybean acres may not look as big as you might think, but you plug in the numbers, it's bad enough. And then, however, the stocks report, they did exactly, again, what we thought they might do. And we talked about this a number of times, that the residual number was huge, that normally in front-end loaded years where you have a lot of exports going out the first part of the year, and this was a record for us, super bullish from that standpoint, it's all over. And what they did find is that there were a lot of beans in transit, in the trucks, in the railroad or something, on the way to port that weren't counted. So when they call an elevator and say, how much you got in the bin, and they call Jerry and ask me how much I got in the bin, I tell them. I don't tell them how much that I got a truckload headed for the elevator. So we found back enough stocks that we could have the carryover not down at 150 or 110, but maybe 200. It actually will rise to 209 carryover. That goes into 2010 crop. Makes it even worse. So it's probably like finding another 1 million acres of beans that's out there. So it's like saying we're going to plant 79 million, which is way too much. Spring wheat was a surprise to us. None of our surveys that we took out of North Dakota saw an increase in spring wheat. We heard of that happening, of earlier maturing or other varieties that produce less yield but more test weight, because the test weight was very poor this year. And we heard some of that wheat would be planted, but still they had in there an increase of about I think 700 or 600,000 acres over last year, somewhere in that neighborhood. But we were looking at 400 million less, or 400,000 less, and it didn't happen. But the beans drop like a rock, then wheat may look better. But the bottom line is that our biggest fear of this whole thing was that we were going to find enough acres, sufficient acres in the report that come out that the board, the trade, or those other people in the world that buy our grains will look at us and say, well, plant what you want, Jerry, I don't care. The market's going to look at this and say, we may switch more corn to beans, especially if we get some rain, and we've got to discourage some bean planting. What my fear is most of all is that the delay in exporting out of Brazil and Argentina just dumps more grain on top of us next fall, about the time we're going to have this our crop coming in. If you think about it, we will probably need to send a signal to South America not to plant beans next year, or as many, because we may have a world surplus of beans. And all this is predicated on a reasonable crop this year. And yesterday we had our conference in Chicago. We had QT Weather speak, and there doesn't appear to be anything on the horizon that's going to give us fits, if nothing else. A year like last year, but maybe we don't know about September, but certainly we get the crop in a pretty decent time, and then we have a cool, wet summer that benefits corn. And Informa presented there, and they suggested that if we'd have had a normal crop last year, we'd have had 168 bushel crop yield. So we have a chance to grow a good crop, and a lot more of it than we grew last year, at least in corn, so in bushels wise. So looking at all that, not a good sign, but there are places we can still make money by hedging grain off. I've told clients this morning, if you haven't done anything yet, and of course we can suggest, but people are free to do what they want, and some of them, of course, do not. Given the economic climate that we're in, and I'm giving a speech today that's entitled Agriculture, an Oasis in a Sea of Despair. And that's where we're at. We've had an opportunity to lock in profits that the average guy that makes cars or makes steel or builds houses would have loved to be able to hedge off his production and make a profit. I think if you haven't done some of that, you need to call your elevator, like I say, and sell something. If you're over 50% sold, it's going to be a long time till next fall, and we'll see what happens this summer. And some of the best laid plans by weathermen changed, but right now I can't find one out there that's calling for a drought or calling for a freeze in July. So looks pretty normal. Once again, a blockbuster situation. There'll be knee-jerk reactions, and the world won't end in one day, but I would suspect that this report is every bit as bearish as the one in January 12th. So now you look at today, we could very well close unchanged to higher, maybe in wheat, I don't know, but what we want to look at now is what the government told us today, what we didn't know yesterday. And what we know today is that the market certainly shouldn't go back above the March highs and make new highs come the end in May and later on. And as I mentioned, I think in the top producer report that comes out, the column comes out in middle of April. What we'll look for next summer is if at any time after June we take out the June highs, that tells us we've digested a lot of information, and whatever price we discovered in the meantime, taking out the June highs, whatever kind of weather we have, and doing that subsequently will tell us that maybe something went wrong with the crop next summer. But that's a ways off, and we'll talk about that later. But have a good weekend, and happy Easter.